Okay, we're going to start trigonometry. And trigonometry kind of gets a bad rap as sounding more or harder than it really is. It's really just about the ratios between the sides of right triangles. So hopefully we can kind of demystify it a little bit here. Just some background on why trig actually works the way it does. By angle-angle similarity, any right triangle with a given acute angle is similar to any other right triangle with that same acute angle. And so the ratios between the sides are proportional. And so what some bright person thought of is that, well, these can be very useful for us to solve problems with, and so there's some generally agreed upon ratios that we use in what's called trigonometry. These three ratios are sine, cosine, and tangent. All right, so we're going to look at how those things are defined. So everything in trig is related to a given, at least for this stage, is related to a given sides and given angle. All right, so I have here a right triangle and I have an angle A. Okay, and with the right triangle, even though I forgot to draw my little square there, sorry, the side across from the right angle is my hypotenuse. Okay, but in relation to my angle here, I've got a side that's across from it, so it's the opposite side, and I've got an adjacent side, or one that's next to it. Okay, so opposite is across from it, adjacent is next to it. And these three ratios are defined in terms of the hypotenuse, the opposite, and the adjacent sides. Okay, so the sine ratio is basically referred to as the sine of angle A is the leg opposite angle A divided by the hypotenuse. And this is abbreviated SIN, but we pronounce it sine instead of sin. This is not sin, this is sine. Okay. The next thing we have is cosine. Cosine is defined as the leg adjacent to angle A, so this leg right here, divided by the hypotenuse, and that's abbreviated COS, but we still say cosine. Tangent is the leg opposite angle A divided by the leg adjacent to angle A, and it's abbreviated TAN. Again, we still pronounce it as tangent. Just like we abbreviate Texas as TX, but we still say Texas. That sort of thing. Even though we generally, you don't read the abbreviation, you read the word that it's abbreviating. Okay. Okay. So what do we do with these things? Well, now that we have these ratios, and using calculations that have been developed from them, we can actually go beyond Pythagorean theorem. Instead of always having to have two sides, or with a special right triangle sort of thing, if we know a side and an angle, we can find another side. If we know two sides, we can actually find an angle, which we couldn't do that before. And so the way we do that is we use either your calculator, or you can use what's called a trig table, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so using this part here, don't put this in your notes. We're going to talk about this when we actually get to class and actually have the calculators in front of us. But this is just kind of the general process of what we're going to do when we solve these equations. So using the Inspire calculators, if you want to find the tangent of 51 degrees, you would press the trig key, which is on the left-hand side. I think it's near the 7. I don't remember off the top of my head. So you can press the trig key, and that gives you this little menu of your trig functions. Don't worry about these three columns on the right-hand side. You'll use those when you get to pre-calc. You don't use them right now. All we care about are these 6 little things right here. So if we're doing tangent, we want to arrow down and select the TAN and press enter, and that gives us this thing here with some parentheses. Then we're going to put in 51 inside the parentheses and hit enter, and that gives us this value. And what that value means is that if I have a right triangle and one of the angles is 51 degrees, then the ratio between the sides across from the 51 degree angle and the side next to the 51 degree angle, the ratio between those is going to be 1.2349. Okay. Now then, if you're using the calculator on your phone, First off, if you haven't noticed it already, to get to the trig functions, you need to turn your phone sideways, generally. And that will get you the scientific calculator part of your phone. And then if you go to, generally, it depends on your phone, but most phones that I've seen, you need to enter the angle first and then press the function, although some Androids, you press the function and then enter it. It depends on your phone. You're going to need to experiment a little bit and see which it is. So you might just try pressing 51 tan and then tan 51, see which one gives you this 1.2349. Okay. Now a trig table. I will give you a trig table for you to keep with you just in case something weird happens and you don't have access to your phone, or if you've got a phone like mine that's kind of silly and won't do the inverse ones we'll talk about in a minute. But this is kind of the way for hundreds of years how people did trig, is they used a trig table because we didn't have calculators. And I still find it useful for at least being able to see the relationships on how these ratios work as you go. All it is a table that goes from 0 to 90. So there's a column from 0 to 45, another column from 45 to 90. It lists the three ratios, and it tells you what those values are. Okay, so if I wanted to find the cosine of 52 degrees, I would find 52 under the angle. I would scan over to the cosine column, and that would give me my answer. So 0.6157, that's my ratio. Okay. Now then, that was we knew either we knew the angle already, or we knew two sides, all that sort of stuff. So now we're going to actually use what are called the inverse trig functions to find a missing angle. If we're given two sides, we can find the angle using trig. When you do get into pre-cal and beyond, these are also called the arc sine, arc cosine, arc tangent. We're just going to call them inverses right now. There's reasons why it's kind of complicated. Anyway, on your calculator, these are going to be listed as sine -1, cosine -1, and tangent -1. These negative ones aren't really in exponents. They're just telling you that, oh, okay, these are the inverse ones. Okay. So let's say I want to find sine -1 of 8 divided by 17. All right, what this means is I want to find the angle whose sine is 8 divided by 17. So in my calculator, again, this is directions for using the Inspires. Your phone calculator will vary wildly. But you want to press the trig button, then go down to sine -1, enter 8 divided by 17 and enter, and you get about 28.07, yada yada yada. Okay, which again means if I've got a right triangle with one leg is 8, the hypotenuse is 17, then the angle opposite the side that's 8 will measure about 28 degrees. Okay. Okay, so using the trig table, it's pretty straightforward. The only tricky part becomes if you have to decide, okay, which one do I want to use? So for example, let's say I want to find the angle whose tangent is 0.35. Well, I scroll down my tangent column until I get to this one. Now, I don't have it exactly 0.35 because again, these are approximations. But I can choose between 0.3443 and 0.3640. And so what I have to do is I have to decide, okay, which one of those is closer to the value I'm looking for? Well, 0.3443 is closer to 0.35 than the other one, so that's the one I'm going to use. So I scan over here and my angle is going to be 19 degrees. Okay. So what you're going to be expected to know, and this is going to be from now until you finish with math, whenever that is, you're going to be expected to know that the sine ratio is the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse, the cosine is the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse, and the tangent is the opposite divided by the adjacent. Okay, there's lots of different ways to memorize these sorts of things. I personally just memorized that. Some people have little mnemonics to help them remember it. A lot of people use what's called SOHCAHTOA, where the letters, again, relate back to which one's which. A phrase I find kind of funny is some old hippie caught another hippie tripping on acid. So you've got sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. Okay. Another one you might do is, there's lots of them involving Hitler for some reason, but there's one, silly old Hitler couldn't advance his troops over Africa. So there's one. However you do it, I don't care, but you need to be able to know which ratio to use with the given information, because I'm not necessarily always going to tell you. Okay. So I've got a triangle here. I know the three sides of my triangle, and I want to find what the ratios are given these three sides. Okay. So sine of A, right? Remember, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So for angle A, the side opposite angle A is going to be 15. My hypotenuse is 17. Come on. So my ratio is going to be 15 divided by 17. Okay. Cosine is adjacent divided by hypotenuse. So the cosine is going to be 8 divided by 17. Tangent is opposite over adjacent, so we get 15 divided by 8. All right, switching around and looking at angle B. So now my hypotenuse is still 17. That doesn't change. But my opposite side is now 8, and my adjacent side is now 15. So I get 8 divided by 17 for my sine, 15 divided by 17 for cosine, and tangent is 8 divided by 15. Okay, so in this case now I've got a triangle. Nice, I label it for you. We know we have a 58-degree angle. We know when the adjacent side is 15, and we're trying to find the opposite side. Well, opposite and adjacent means I'm going to use tangent. So the tangent of 58 is going to be x divided by 15. I multiply both sides by 15 to clear the fraction, and I get 15 times the tangent of 58, which gives me about 24.0. Next problem here. Again, I have a 46-degree angle. I know my hypotenuse is 26, and I want to know what my adjacent side is. Well, adjacent and hypotenuse is going to be cosine. So cosine of 46 is equal to x divided by 26. X is going to be 26 times the cosine of 46, which gives me approximately 18.1. Again, all I'm doing is I'm just multiplying both sides by whatever is on the bottom of my fraction. Okay. Okay. Now I've got two sides, and I want to find the angle. Okay. So I've got my opposite side and my hypotenuse. That's going to be the sine. So the sine of whatever my angle is going to be 19 divided by 26. And since the way that you kind of undo the sine is you're going to do the inverse sine. So x is going to be sine -1 of 19 divided by 26. So it's going to be about 47 degrees.